has a primary speaker and his circle of characters, but then there are these 1,000-year-old Japanese people who seem to be carrying on a parallel conversation on similar topics. Structurally, the book is a kind of sandwich. In the middle, the speaker's brilliant and difficult mother dies. In the first and third section, the speaker finds somebody to love after many years of being alone. I'm going to do a little experiment today. I'm going to read 2 poems each from the first and third section, and I'm going to read the middle section in its entirety, which is not that long, so don't be terrified by that. But this is kind of memorial to my mother, who gave me poetry and is the reason I became a poet today. A few years ago, I was driving on a mountain road in Maine in the snow, and I was listening to a song by Jane Siberry. Anybody know her wonderful lyrics to her songs? And there was the phrase, "Love is everything they said it would be." And I immediately flashed on the situation of this first poem. The speaker is remembering a decision he made about love while still in utero. When in the uterine empyrean they told me. When in the uterine empyrean they told me of love, they named it a sickness, fever, impediment to enlightenment. Some swore it could make you wail over hills of hell in a long black veil, defenestrate yourself in a Second Empire gown, or stand wringing wet at the intersection with a cup and a sign reading, "Comfort me with apples." There were a few, humiliated and exalted, who rose like comets in yellowy tears to sing in Provençal of the name, the same longing name. But others warned that whom he loves, he corrects, of friendship with benefits, balcony scenes, mad scenes in all white restaurants, of the turned back in bed. But when they said I could remain behind if I chose, like an unlit lamp, sounding my brass and tinkling my cymbal, I didn't think. I seized the bloody flag of my attachments and tore down the tunnel of what I couldn't know was my millionth birth.
That's cool.
This is the story of how Stephen and I met. Link. Trying to talk himself out of a tremor, he argued it's not just this interview decides the outcome of many years. Every gesture triggers a cascade of ghost futures, reels Mars and Venus around the roulette of their mansions. So don't sweat any particular node. Look to the protection of the whole, a pattern that seen from the distance seems to hold, has held. Remember how in the city, September those years ago, midnight began the day you turned 47? You didn't know it, but if you clicked that pulsing link, if you followed where it led, you'd marry in the Commonwealth. If not, you'd live every single year and die alone. So now we come to the mother section of the book, the middle section, and it begins with maybe the strangest and most beautiful of the Japanese poems that Stephen and I have translated together. From the Japanese of Gyoki. The debt I owe the breasts my mother in tender mercy gave. To 100 stones add 80. I repay today. From very ancient times, the Japanese have trained cormorant birds, the ones with the really long necks, to do their fishing for them. And it's very beautiful to watch at night, and that's a central image in this next poem. Invocation. Little fishes, let the fires I hang at night in iron cages over your waters call you to the verge, high in your world as you are allowed to go, and then higher. Sweet fish, blonde with lack of light, smelling of melon and cucumber milk, come to my cressets, gather and assume a shape. Come up to the painful air and gasp again as you did in life. Let yourself be caught. Let me catch you with the beak of my pen, as the cormorant catches, not to swallow, but to spit, cough up, feed the hungry. Let the dead school that was my mother live. My mother tries to quit. My mother is an animal of smoke. I'll do better now, her message says. I'm not strong, but I'll be better now. My mother's house is 60 years of smoke. The box she sent exhaled what she inhaled. The book in the box exhaled her breath. The poems in the book exhaled her breath. The poems she wasn't strong enough to speak aloud, she sent to me, still smoking. Finally, she said, I could hold it in my hand, but couldn't inhale. The book was Yeats. I put him in the window to breathe.
Oh.
Received wisdom. I thought my mother gave me words because she loved and brandished words between the smoker's ash of her laughs and her narrative sighs audible from the back of the house like those of any really good tragedian. So when the time came, it was her interesting chromosomes I thanked in those places acknowledgments are made, and never mentioned the father, whose words to me seemed dull and desolate. Not until I learned how the world is built between its poles did I understand he also helped fund that cursed fountain in me by laying the Y of his ice next to her X of fire.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
My stepmother feeds the birds of Gethsemane. To she who tried to mother me in the absence of my mother, who married a gentleman after my father, who had a way of pushing fallen hair away from her dark eyes as though she suffered her own face, who did not denounce the wandering preacher for an old crime, but repeated the Our Father at home until he had packed his tent and gone, who begged my father all of one night to retrieve me from a man with whom he had left me, whose frightened question the next morning I did not answer, who feeds her birds food she has chewed from her own mouth, whose voice, when she answers the phone, is never as though she imagines any good of it, whose question I am ready to answer if she will ask me again to take away this cup of tears and fire and gall.